in the silence of history. There are moments that seem calm, but hide the storm that is about to come. This is Echoes of War. By the winter of 1944, the world was exhausted. For 5 long years, war had consumed continents, destroyed cities, and taken millions of lives. But now, there was hope. The Allied armies had landed in Normandy. They had broken through the defenses of Europe. They had pushed across France. And the impossible had happened. Paris was free. Crowds filled the streets. Flags waved. Church bells rang for the first time in years. For many, it felt like the end was finally near. On the Western Front, soldiers began to believe it too. They were tired, but they were confident. They had seen the German army retreat again and again. They had crossed rivers once thought impossible. They had survived battles that should have ended them. Now winter had arrived. And winter meant pause. Snow covered the land in silence. The cold slowed movement. The war seemed to breathe for just a moment. Some soldiers talked about going home. They imagined the warmth of family, the smell of food, the sound of children's laughter. Some carried letters in their pockets. Others read the same message again and again, holding on to the future like a fragile promise. In quiet moments, they allowed themselves to dream. But war punishes those who dream too soon. Far to the east, another storm was already forming. Inside Germany, defeat surrounded the nation. From the east, the Soviet Union was advancing relentlessly after the catastrophe of the Battle of Stalingrad. From the west, the Allies moved closer every day. Factories were bombed. Cities burned. Supplies ran short. And yet, inside the mind of one man, the war was not lost. Adolf Hitler refused to accept reality. He believed in destiny. He believed in sudden reversals. He believed that history could still be changed by will alone. His generals doubted the plan. Many knew the army no longer had the strength. But fear and loyalty kept them silent. Hitler demanded one final offensive. Not defensive. Not symbolic. Decisive. The plan was simple in concept and terrifying in execution. Strike where the enemy felt safest. The Ardennes. A region of dense forests, narrow roads, and frozen hills. In 1940, Germany had used this same path to invade Europe. Now, Hitler would try again. If the attack succeeded, it could divide the Allied armies. It could capture the vital port of Antwerp. It could force Britain and the United States into negotiations. A single victory could change everything. And so, in secrecy, the German army began to move. At night, columns of tanks rolled through villages without lights. Infantry marched in silence. Engines were shut off when aircraft passed overhead. Radio silence was absolute. Hundreds of thousands of men prepared for battle in the snow. Many knew it was a desperate gamble. Some believed it was their last chance to survive. Others simply obeyed, because war leaves little room for choice. Meanwhile, on the other side of the forest, American soldiers relaxed. The Ardennes was considered a quiet sector. Units sent there were often inexperienced or recovering from earlier battles. They believed the enemy was too weak to attack. They believed the winter would protect them. They believed the worst was over. The night of December 15th was calm. Snow fell slowly from a dark sky. The wind whispered through the trees. Some soldiers slept. Some stood guard. Some stared into the darkness, unaware that thousands of enemy troops were already moving closer. Then, before dawn on December 16th, the silence ended. The forest exploded. At exactly 5:30 in the morning, the silence of winter was shattered. Without warning, thousands of artillery guns opened fire at once. The sky flashed with violent bursts of light. The earth shook as if it were tearing apart. Explosions echoed through the frozen valleys of the Ardennes. American soldiers woke in confusion and terror. Many had never experienced such an overwhelming bombardment. The sound was constant, deafening, impossible to escape. Trees were torn apart. Foxholes collapsed. Communication wires were cut within minutes. Officers tried to give orders, but the chaos was total. Some units lost contact with command before they even understood what was happening. Then, through the smoke and snow, the next wave arrived. German armor. Panzer divisions moved forward with terrifying speed, their engines roaring through the cold air. Infantry followed close behind, moving through forests, fields, and frozen roads. The attack was not random. It was precise. It was coordinated. And it was overwhelming. Entire American positions were surrounded before they could react. Some soldiers fought to the last bullet. Others were forced to surrender. Columns of prisoners were marched into the forest, disappearing into the fog. The German advance pushed deep into Allied lines, creating a massive bulge in the front. History would forever remember this moment as the Battle of the Bulge. Weather became Germany's greatest ally. Heavy clouds covered the sky. Snowstorms reduced visibility. Allied aircraft remained grounded. Without air support, the defenders felt isolated and vulnerable. But the danger went even deeper. German commandos infiltrated Allied lines wearing American uniforms. They changed road signs. They redirected convoys. They spread false information. Confusion and paranoia spread quickly. Every soldier began to question every stranger. Trust became a luxury. The cold made everything worse. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. Weapons jammed. Engines failed. Fuel froze inside vehicles. Frostbite attacked silently. Some men lost fingers. Others lost feet. Some lost their lives without ever seeing the enemy. And still, the German offensive continued. It seemed unstoppable. But in war, momentum can be fragile. And soon, resistance would begin to grow. The snow did not stop. Day after day, it continued to fall. It covered the forests, the roads, the ruins, the bodies. The Ardennes looked almost peaceful. But beneath that white silence, the battle for survival continued. Inside Bastogne, the situation was becoming desperate. Food was running out. Ammunition was counted, bullet by bullet. Every shot had to matter. Every mistake could mean death. Many soldiers had not slept properly for days. Their eyes burned from exhaustion. Their hands trembled from cold. Some had no winter uniforms. They wrapped their feet in cloth, paper, anything they could find, to survive just one more night. Others shared gloves, passing them from one man to another during guard duty, because frostbite was as dangerous as the enemy. Still, they refused to surrender. They held the line, because they knew what was at stake. If Bastogne fell, the German advance could continue, and the war could change. Outside the city, German forces tightened their grip. They attacked from every direction. Artillery shells exploded across frozen fields. The ground shook. The air burned. Snipers waited in the trees, watching, waiting. Every movement could be the last. Days passed. The sky remained gray, heavy, silent. Without air support, the defenders felt alone, cut off, forgotten. Hope was fading. Then, something unexpected happened. A message arrived. German officers demanded surrender. They promised food, medical care, safety, if the Americans laid down their weapons. The letter reached General Anthony McAuliffe. He was tired, cold, under constant pressure. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then he spoke. One word. Nuts? The reply confused the German officers. But its meaning was clear. Bastogne would not surrender. The battle intensified. German armor pushed closer. Infantry advanced through snow and smoke. Street by street. House by house. The defenders fought like men with nothing left to lose. Every building became a fortress. Every window a firing position. The wounded refused evacuation. Many stayed to fight because they believed that if they stopped, everything would collapse. And still, the sky remained closed. Gray. Cold. Endless. Hope was disappearing. Then, one morning, something changed. At first, it was only light. A faint glow behind the clouds. Soldiers looked up. Unsure. Afraid to believe. Slowly, the clouds opened. The first blue sky in days appeared above Bastogne. And then, they heard it. A distant sound. Engines. Low. Growing louder. Transport planes filled the sky. Supplies began to fall. Parachutes opened. Food. Ammunition. Medical kits. Warm clothing. Hope. Soon after, fighter bombers attacked German positions. Tanks burned. Artillery was destroyed. The siege was breaking. For the first time in days, the defenders believed they might survive. The turning point had begun. But the battle was far from over, because the enemy was still strong, still desperate. And the Ardennes would demand even more sacrifice. Far to the south, while Bastogne fought for survival, a bold and almost impossible plan was already unfolding. General George Patton believed that war was never predictable. He never trusted silence. He never trusted calm fronts. Because in war, calm usually means something terrible is coming. So when the German offensive began, he reacted faster than anyone expected. Within hours, he made one of the most daring decisions of the entire war. He ordered the U.S. Third Army to turn north. Not in weeks. Not in days. Immediately. In the middle of winter. In the middle of chaos. Tens of thousands of soldiers began to move. Tanks. Artillery. Supply trucks. Miles and miles of vehicles crossing frozen roads. The weather was merciless. Snowstorms reduced visibility to almost nothing. Drivers could barely see the road ahead. Vehicles slid into ditches. Convoys became disorganized. Engines froze. Fuel thickened. Metal cracked under the cold. But the army kept moving, because every man understood one thing. If Bastogne fell, the Allied front could collapse, and the war could change. So they marched for hours, for days, without proper sleep, without warmth. Many wrapped their feet in cloth to avoid frostbite. Some lost feeling in their hands. Some lost hope. But no one stopped. German commanders did not expect this speed. They believed the winter had slowed everything. They believed the Americans were unprepared. They were wrong. Patton had trained his army for mobility, for speed, for sudden change. And now, that preparation was saving lives. But the advance was not easy. German ambushes waited along the roads. Mines destroyed vehicles. Snipers targeted officers. Artillery fire turned quiet forests into chaos. Every kilometer was paid in blood. Still, they moved. Day after day, night after night, until finally they reached Bastogne. On December 26, 1944, American tanks broke through German lines. The siege was broken. Inside the city, soldiers saw the armored vehicles approaching through the snow. Some laughed, some cried, some simply sat in silence. Because they had survived. The Germans had lost the initiative. The surprise was gone. And now, the Allies would strike back. But the battle was far from over, because desperation makes an enemy more dangerous, and the Ardennes would still demand more lives. As January 1945 arrived, the German offensive began to collapse. The same winter that had protected the attack was now destroying it. Fuel shortages became critical. Tanks were abandoned on frozen roads. Vehicles stopped. Engines silent. Some crews destroyed their own machines. Others walked into the forests, hoping to survive. The sky finally cleared. For days, the weather had hidden German movements. Now, Allied aircraft filled the air. Fighters hunted convoys. Bombers destroyed supply lines. Columns of smoke rose across the snow. Every road became dangerous. Every movement a risk. Momentum disappeared. Inside the German high command, tension spread. Hitler refused to accept defeat. He demanded more attacks, more sacrifice. Even when the war was already lost, many officers knew the truth. Germany no longer had the resources, but the orders remained. So the fighting continued, not for victory or survival. Meanwhile, Allied forces launched powerful counterattacks. American, British, Canadian, advancing slowly, relentlessly, village by village, forest by forest. The battlefield became a landscape of ruins, broken trees, burned vehicles, frozen bodies. The snow no longer looked peaceful. It looked haunted. For civilians, the suffering was unimaginable. Homes destroyed, families separated, children hiding in basements, listening to explosions above them. War had entered their lives, and it would never leave. By late January, the Germans were pushed back. The offensive had failed. Germany had spent its last reserves, its last strength. The Western Front would never again face such a threat. The road to Berlin was open. Only months later, the war in Europe would end. But the price had been enormous. The Battle of the Bulge became the largest and bloodiest battle fought by the United States in World War II. More than 1 million men were involved. Tens of thousands were killed, wounded, or captured. And for those who survived, the war never truly ended. Because war does not disappear. It remains in memories, in silence, in dreams. It echoes through history, long after the last shot. And today, we still listen. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, like, subscribe, and share. Because every share keeps these stories alive. This is Echoes of War.